Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhaṃ Dhammaṃ Sanghaṃ Namassāmi. So yesterday, I spent the day at Spirit Rock and started I used a day long to explore mindfulness of breathing, just using the discourse on the Buddha's instructions on mindfulness of breathing. So I think I'll just keep going with that. People seem to benefit from it yesterday, and there's a lot that can be drawn out from that discourse. So I think one of the things to reflect on in the cultivation of mindfulness of breathing is when the Buddha teaches it, and he follows the kind of say like a template or a pattern of the four foundations of mindfulness. So as one is contemplating or developing the mindfulness of these different aspects of body, feeling, mind, and the mental phenomena, even on the insight level, the actual mindfulness of the breath is always there. It's a constant. Once the foundation that one is consistently staying with, is the mindfulness of the in-breath and the out-breath. So that it's not that we have to sort of distance ourselves from the experience of the physical body and just dwell just in pleasurable experience or the mindfulness of the mind itself. The mindfulness of the breath is always there, and that's really important because it's grounding us in moment-to-moment experience and keeping a foundation, an anchor of a bodily experience, so that it's not some disembodied meditation thing happening. One is aware of the experience of the body, experience of posture, experience of the breath coming in, the breath going out, but one is also attentive to different elements of experience. So it doesn't mean Because sometimes we think, oh, I've got to one-point the mind, I've got to focus the mind, I've got to concentrate the mind. And you try to blot out certain areas of experience, and there's a disconnect that oftentimes happens, and it's detrimental to our cultivation. The When the Buddha speaks of the mind settling, it's a settling that is unification of mind. I mean, oftentimes it's used. It can be translated as one-pointed ekagata, one-pointed, but that's a bit misleading, I think, because it's in that one point. There's many things happening. One is integrating one's experience of the breath, of the body, of the particular whatever mental states we're experiencing. And they're not at odds with each other. It's actually unified. It's functioning together. So I think that's an important aspect to be paying attention to as we cultivate mindfulness of breathing, and and explore these different elements of experience within the mindfulness of breathing. Yesterday I spent a lot of time on the aspects of mindfulness of the body, mindfulness of feeling, and certainly there were quite a few people that are here today were there yesterday. I think I'll just continue. There's the mindfulness of the mind, and the Buddha begins the section on the mind, because it's broken down into, say, like 16 steps and four sets of four that correspond with the four foundations of mindfulness, so that the four aspects of experience around the mind is experiencing the mind. I breathe in. Experiencing the mind, I breathe out, and that when you say experiencing the mind, it's one of the ways that Ajahn Jeff translates it as sensitive to the mind, and the Pali word is patisangveti. So jittan patisangveti. So patisangveti is sensitive to feeling. Veti, as in say the root of Vedana, of feeling. So feeling the mind. Pati and sang are both amplifiers. So it means maybe like experiencing fully, or completely sensitive to the mind. I breathe in. Experiencing fully, completely sensitive to the mind. And the mind, when we're sensitive to the mind, it doesn't mean that we're analyzing the mind or psychologizing it. But what we are doing is sensitive to the particular mood and the content of the mind, so that we're experiencing, sensitive to the mind. And I think it's helpful to recognize that in the discourse on the foundations of mindfulness that the Buddha gives, that section on the mind is sort of knowing the mind of greed as the mind of greed, knowing the mind without greed as the mind without greed, knowing the mind with anger as the mind with anger, knowing the mind. So it's not some esoteric mind somewhere or some idealized version of a mind, but it's our mind. This is what we have. Sometimes there's greed, sometimes there's not. Sometimes there's aversion, irritation, sometimes there's not. Sometimes there's delusion, and sometimes there's not. And learning how to be sensitive to that as we breathe in, as we breathe out. Knowing the mind that's contracted, knowing the mind that's expansive, is sort of being sensitive to what we're actually experiencing. Because so often when we meditate, we don't meditate mindful or say fully sensitive to experiencing completely. What we tend to do is add a layer of what we think we should be experiencing, where we idealize what we think we should be experiencing if we were decent meditators, and we forget that we're just experiencing what we experience, and it's really helpful to make it real rather than meditating, trying to conform your experience to some idea that you picked up in some book you read how many years ago, or some talk you heard from somewhere else, or some philosophy paper you read somewhere on Buddhism. Those are all additions, and to be able to as we breathe in, as we breathe out, experiencing the mind as it is, and not coding it over with our projections or our expectations, and just so this is what the experience is, and that is. It's hard to stress enough the importance of that, because we tend not to live in our experience, but we tend to live in our projection and conception of experience, and then wonder why we're messed up. So it's so on one level it seems so basic, but the reality is we tend to forget that. We keep projecting and going into some other some either expectation or worry or fear that I'm experiencing this. That's what it means. I'm a hopeless meditator. If only I could do this or do that. And it's just it's one in breath, one out breath. What's the experience? And if it's known clearly, then we can deal with it skillfully. The next aspect is that the Buddha gives is um, gladdening the mind. I breathe in, gladdening the mind, I breathe out. Or Ajahn Jeff translates, satisfying the mind, I breathe in, satisfying the mind, I breathe out. And I think that's really important as well, in the sense of I mean, it's okay to enjoy the meditation. So often we think, sometimes you hear people, they go to meditation retreats and how's your retreat? You say, oh, it was really tough. I had a hard time, but I think I learned a lot. Well, maybe not. But did you learn how to gladden your mind? Did you learn how to actually satisfy and brighten the mind? Because there's a certain sense of from our kind of a cultural perspective of if we're no pain, no gain sort of thing, and on an exercise run, but then it translates into when we're developing the mind and developing our meditation, or where we're if we start to feel too good in meditating and practicing, then we start to feel guilty. Oh, I shouldn't feel this good. I must be doing something wrong. And that there's a certain absurdity that we keep ourselves locked into limiting our experience, and the Buddha is quite explicit in the sense that one needs to know how to be skillful in brightening the mind, experiencing well-being. That the word in the scriptural language is abhipamodayang, and it's pamodia is like to delight in, and abhi is again it's another amplifier, so that's not just delighting, but actually really delighting. I breathe in, and really delighting in this, I breathe out. And of course, then on a certain level, how do you delight in just breathing in, breathing out? Well, because it's on a certain level, you've just got this neutral sensation of the breath coming in, breath going out. But as one is paying attention to the mind, and one is, say, settling attention and cultivating a continuity of awareness and relinquishing or releasing various obstructions and obsessions, then the mind starts to really brighten. A week or two ago, I gave a talk, just reminding people of that very short saying of Ajahn Chah's, or instruction of Ajahn Chah's, around letting go. I would say, in a sense, we're letting go, relinquishing, releasing. So letting go a little, you get a little peace. Letting go a lot, you get a lot of peace. Letting go completely, you get complete peace. And sort of just what's left is awareness, knowing, this quality of attention, which is not being attentive to this quality of gladdening the mind. The next step that the Buddha points to is a he uses the word samadhahang, so it's using the word samadhi, and so sometimes you can translate as concentrating the mind and breathe in, concentrating the mind or breathe out, or which I find sometimes if we use the word concentration too much, there's a certain assumption of tightness and tenseness that I think most of us assume, and Sarah Ajahn Jeff translates it as steadying the mind, which is, I think, is really, really good, because it avoids the use of the word concentrating, because that does tend to feel narrow or tight, and say the problem isn't the word, it's our associations that we have with it. But so steadying the mind is, I think, is really a helpful way of really just steadying the mind. Or say in the in the Thai language, the word samadhi tends to be translated as more like, say, establishing the mind firmly. So it says, okay, well, firmly establishing the mind, I breathe in, firmly establishing the mind, I breathe out. And those are. So there's a caring for that settling of the mind, allowing the mind to settle on the breath, or to settle with the breath, especially as we relax into the mindfulness of breathing. There is a natural settling that takes place, both physically and mentally, and to allow that process to increasingly, settle and deepen, so that there's a steadiness and a steadying that takes place. Again, it's paying, as we do that, there's always going to be, some distraction, some proliferation pop up in the mind. But the breath is always there to catch you. And that's what mindfulness of breathing is, like plugging into that rhythm of the breath, allowing the breath to carry one along and settle. Because that just letting that rhythm of the breath kind of expand and settle, and that an ease both in body and mind, letting that establish itself. And it relies on that application of attention, awareness, mindfulness, and kind of nurturing that, looking after that, caring for it. Am I present? Am I here? Is the breath still clear? How do I? And that's a question to be. How do I both create and sustain an interest in the breath and in the experience of the mind, the experience of the body, experience of the breath itself? That taking an interest in how to explore that experience so that it doesn't become tedious or or there's certain kind of overbearing or obsessive. How can we, and that you have to relax into that establishing of awareness, relaxing into the rhythm of the physical body, but the rhythm of attention, because that attention has its own rhythm as well, and it isn't just a constant. There's where you sit down to meditate and say, "Oh, I'm going to be mindful of my breath for the next hour." It's depending on the particular mood or the particular level of tiredness or energy. There's going to be a rhythm to the attention itself, the mindfulness itself. So one needs to be alert to that and learn how to tune into the experience and see, because it's not as if, say, there's the Buddha's discourse on and instructions on mindfulness of breathing isn't something that you start at step one and then you just got to keep plugging away till you fulfill all 16 steps, and then you're going to get your diploma on mindfulness of breathing. And it's a each of those steps are tools that we gain some understanding and some skill with, and then we as we're meditating and practicing and training, then we can be lifting up a particular step or aspect of mindfulness of breathing, so that it's of help to us. It's of service in our goal of cultivating understanding and peace. So gaining, just experimenting with these different steps. What's it actually mean? How do I get comfortable with that? What do I understand by that? So that and in this section on mindfulness of the mind, then just learning more clearly of what is the different moods of the mind. What's the different content that helps to settle the mind? What are the different things that pull the mind away? And that's, I'd say, the last step in the section on the mindfulness of the mind, the releasing the mind. I breathe in, releasing the mind. I breathe out. That releasing vimochayang is the Pali, and sort of releasing, freeing the mind. I breathe in, freeing the mind. I breathe out, and it's important as well. And I pointed to that yesterday in instruction in Spirit Rock, that each of the steps in this discourse that the Buddha gives have a kind of an underlying instruction as well, in the sense of the first two are just paying attention to the long in breath, long out breath, short in breath, short out breath. The verb that the Buddha uses is pachahanati, which is just to know, to understand, and But then all of the rest, the 14 steps of the mindfulness of breathing, instruction of mindfulness of breathing, the verb that the Buddha uses is sikati, and that means training. Training thus, it's like training thus, releasing the mind I breathe in, training thus, releasing the mind I breathe out. So that, and each step is, this is a training. It's a training to be done. Or practicing in this way. I breathe, releasing the mind I breathe in, releasing the mind I breathe. So it's like sikati is to train, to practice, to learn, and learn is not just it's learning through doing. It's not theorizing or memorizing from a book. It's sikati is to actually put things into practice and learn from what we do and how we do it. So that in that releasing the mind or freeing the mind, this isn't pointing to an ultimate freedom or an ultimate release. It's pointing to the releasing the mind from those basic obstructions, basic hindrances, so that there's and that's where, there's many different templates that the Buddha uses in terms of how hindrances, the different attachments and whatnot, but certainly the say like the 5 hindrances is a good template to bring up in terms of, okay, what are the releasing the mind from just sensual desire. I breathe in, releasing the mind from sensual desire. I breathe out. That's the first hindrance. Releasing the mind from ill will, I breathe in. Releasing the mind from ill will, I breathe out. Freeing the mind from sloth and torpor, I breathe in. Freeing the mind from sloth and torpor, I breathe out. This is a way of freeing the mind from its fundamental obstructions. So the 5 hindrances of sense desire, ill will, sloth and torpor, restlessness and worry, skeptical doubt. Those are the, 5 hindrances. And those hindrances are what the Buddha says are the fundamental hindrances to full awareness and clear comprehension, or to clear discernment. So that being alert to how those hindrances manifest, but then taking interest in releasing that, being able to release, to free the mind from a particular hindrance, and as we release and free the mind from those hindrances, then it's quite natural that the mind becomes more clear, more lucid, and again more steady, more bright. It's quite natural, and this is the images that the Buddha used. One of the sets of images that the Buddha uses with the hindrances is the things that cloud or sully water. So water, when it doesn't have anything added to it or anything stirring it up, then it's still and clear. And they say, but I would say for the image that the Buddha uses for sense desires, like if you add color to water, then if you put red color in, the water goes red and blue, and it becomes all colored. So it's difficult to see clearly through it and allow it to reflect back with ill will and aversion. It's the water that's heated and boiling, and it loses its kind of its stillness and clarity. Water that's sloth and torpor. It's like water that has algae or something on it, so that it's you can't really see it clearly. The restlessness and worries when there's water that has wind making it ripple and waves on it, so that it's not clear and still. And with skeptical doubt, it's like water that is got mud or something. It's turbid. It's actually it's also put in a dark closet as well. So it's one isn't able to use it as a mirror to reflect back or to see clearly through it. But what it also points to, and in the sense using that kind of image, is that let's say the nature of the mind is that it when it isn't added to, when we release those different additives and conditions that disturb it, it is clear and still, and that is say that possibility of experiencing that clarity and stillness. It isn't something that we have to force onto it, and so we just have to release the things that obstruct, or release the things that hinder, release the things that are disturbing the mind, to free it, free the mind from those conditions, and that so that to be able to tune into that, and just on each in-breath and each out-breath, what do I need to release? What do I need to free the mind from at this moment? What would be helpful? And as we do that, then this clarity and stillness starts to manifest, and it's again, it's not something that we have to be forcing the mind to be peaceful and still. It's when we don't get in the way, and when we don't stir it up, when we don't poke at it with whatever obsession we've got in the moment, that stillness and clarity is there. And just learning how to recognize it, and learning how to see that, learning how to train so that we do get a glimpse of that and experience it. And that's say mindfulness of breathing. We have that opportunity, each in-breath and each out-breath. We can keep returning to the breath. We can keep grounding our experience in the experience of the in-breath and out-breath, and as we pick up those the encouragements that the Buddha gives for training the mind, then it just is. It's closer and closer to us. It is to encourage people to explore this practice of mindfulness of breathing and explore the ways in which it can make it meaningful or relevant or useful to you. And it does take exploring. It does take taking an interest in it. It isn't just that you sit down, cross-legged position, and close your eyes, and then all of a sudden the mind becomes peaceful and still. It just doesn't work like that. You have to train. You have to practice, and you have to have different supportive tools that you become skilled with, so that it's a craft. It's like one of the titles of of a book of Ajahn Lee's that Ajahn Jeff translated. The title was "The Craft of the Heart," and it's a really apt phrase, because that so much of our practice is a craft of the heart, learning how to cultivate this human heart in a way that we do experience peace and well-being. So I'll offer that for reflection this afternoon.